Timeless beauty. The power of style at every age. There's something magnetic about a woman over 50. She's seen decades come and go, yet somehow she never disappears into them. Her elegance doesn't chase trends. It shapes them. Her style isn't just fabric and buttons. It's lived experience, stitched with wisdom and self-assurance. This video isn't just about fashion through the decades. It's a love letter to every woman who turned 50 and didn't fade, she glowed. From post-war grace to shoulder-padded power to today's effortless chic, the evolution of style after 50 is a mirror of resilience, reinvention, and quiet rebellion. Because being stylish at 50 isn't about looking young. It's about looking you. Fully, proudly, beautifully. As we walk through the decades, from the polished silhouettes of the 1950s to the tailored comfort of the 2020s, we'll explore how mature women navigated change, embraced freedom, and redefined beauty on their terms. You'll see iconic outfits, forgotten trends, surprising revivals, and timeless lessons. But most of all, you'll be reminded that elegance doesn't expire. It evolves. So whether you're 51 or 81, this journey is yours. And by the end, you just might find a decade or three calling your name again. Not for nostalgia's sake, but because style, when it's right, never really goes out of style. Let's begin where it all started, the 1950s. A decade of grace, femininity, and quietly radical women rewriting the rules, one cinched waist at a time. 1950s grace. Hourglass, silhouettes, and polished perfection. The 1950s weren't just about fashion. They were about reclaiming femininity after the war. And for women over 50, it was a decade of unapologetic polish. Picture this: nipped, in waists, full-circle skirts, and blouses that hinted at delicacy without being fragile. There was an art to getting dressed. Stockings were carefully rolled, gloves were matched to shoes, and the handbag? Always structured, always elegant. For older women in this era, style meant dignity. Mature fashion icons weren't trying to be youthful, they were regal. Think of long wool coats with cinched belts, brooches pinned perfectly over the heart, and pearls worn not for flash, but for quiet sophistication. Even day dresses came with shapewear, a matching hat, and a sense of occasion. You might imagine this era as restrictive, but for many women over 50, it was freeing. After years of rationing and service, fashion was fun again. They dressed not just for husbands or parties, but for presence, for walking into a room and being seen. Today, elements of this style still work beautifully. A fit and flare dress, a well-fitted blazer, mid-heel pumps that feel refined, not frumpy, and don't underestimate the impact of a clean chignon and a swipe of classic red lipstick. The 1950s were about creating shape, elegance, and presence, something every woman over 50 can still channel today. You weren't dressing to disappear. You were dressing to stand tall, with grace in every step. Let's now explore the women who embodied this post-war poise and made being over 50 look like the prime of life. 1950s. Icons over 50. Inspiration from real women. While younger stars like Marilyn Monroe captured the media's gaze, it was the women over 50 who truly defined sophistication. In the 1950s, older women weren't trying to compete with youth. They embodied an elegance that only came with age. Take Eleanor Roosevelt. At 66, she was a global force, always seen in structured jackets, long skirts, and sensible heels. Her fashion was never loud, yet her presence was undeniable. She taught us that style is substance. Then, there's Grace Kelly's mother, Margaret Kelly, a Philadelphia socialite known for her understated gowns and perfect posture. Her quiet confidence shaped her daughter's elegance. In her 50s, she was the kind of woman who wore silk gloves not for show, but because elegance was a way of life. Ordinary women mirrored this look. Church attire was a production. Sunday best meant pressed dresses, pillbox hats, and gloves. Hair was curled and set, never rushed. Mature women had a look that said, "I value myself." What's refreshing is that style wasn't about bearing skin or making statements. It was about polish, balance, and honoring yourself. Women took pride in age-appropriate fashion, and in doing so, redefined what it meant to be attractive past 50. Today, we can borrow from their grace. A structured coat, a subtle string of pearls, a perfectly hemmed skirt, these details still whisper of a time when older women led with poise. As the 1960s approached, change was coming. But before revolution hit, let's look at how women over 50 gently began to shift toward modernity, still modest, but open to new silhouettes and colors, continued in Next Message. Continuing from Section 4 to 1960s. Transition. Modesty meets mod revolution. The 1960s were a fashion revolution. But for women over 50, the shift was more gradual. They didn't leap into miniskirts and go-go boots. Instead, they blended the old world's modesty with the new era's energy. Fashion evolved, so did they. Think boxy jackets over sheath dresses, pastel suits, and kitten heels. Hemlines rose, but not too high. Turtlenecks replaced collars. Cardigans were still queen, but paired with slimmer trousers and statement brooches. There was a hint of mod, but never too much. It was about taste, not trend chasing. Patterns were playful but controlled. Instead of psychedelic swirls, 50-plus women leaned into florals, checks, and houndstooth. Hair got shorter. Sharper the beehive appeared. But many kept soft sets or bouffants. Gloves slowly faded, but structured handbags remained. This decade marked the start of balancing conservatism with curiosity. The societal changes, civil rights, feminism, global awareness crept into fashion, too. Women over 50 began to assert independence through their wardrobe, experimenting with shapes and textiles that felt modern without sacrificing grace. Today, the 60s are a goldmine of inspiration for mature women. Clean lines, smart coats, and cropped jackets still elevate any look. And the quiet confidence of that era, where a woman didn't need trends to command attention, remains evergreen. Up next, let's meet the icons who proved that aging in the 60s wasn't about fading into the background, but rising into relevance. 1960s. Icons over 50. Timeless style in a youth. Obsessed era. The 1960s may have celebrated youth culture, Twiggy, the Beatles, and the sexual revolution. But some of the most iconic style moments came from women over 50 who stayed grounded amidst the swirl. Jacqueline Kennedy's mother, Janet Auchincloss, was elegance personified. Always poised, she wore Chanel-like suits, gloves, and perfectly coiffed hair, even as her daughter modernized White House fashion. She reminded us that refinement never ages. Diana Vreeland, in her 60s during this decade, redefined fashion media. Her editorial style? Bold red lips, dramatic prints, and turbans that became her signature. She didn't dress young, she dressed powerfully, and her presence in Harper's Bazaar and Vogue influenced a generation. Then there was Audrey Hepburn, yes, still young in the early 60s. But even in her later decades, she wore the same clean silhouettes, ballet flats, and cropped pants that became timeless markers of post-50 chic. Let's not forget ordinary women, mothers, teachers, community leaders who quietly transitioned from full skirts to pencil skirts, from lace collars to tailored blouses. Their wardrobe reflected resilience in changing times. Their secret? They embraced change on their own terms. So whether it was a pastel shift dress or a double-breasted trench, their clothing choices said, "I see what's new, but I still know who I am." As we head into the 1970s, the world in wardrobes would loosen up, and women over 50 would embrace flow, freedom, and fearless self-expression like never before. 1970s. Freedom. Earthy elegance and flowy fashion. If the 60s were a whisper of change, the 70s were a shout. For women over 50, the era brought a sense of liberation, not just in society, but in closets. Gone were rigid silhouettes and ladylike constraints. In their place came flowing fabrics, rich textures, and a sense of movement both literal and symbolic. Kaftans became a statement of ease and elegance. Wide-legged trousers replaced pencil skirts, paired with soft blouses in earthy hues like rust, olive, and mustard. Think suede vests, silk scarves tied at the neck, and boots that meant businesswomen embraced a grown-up version of bohemian chic. And the fabrics? Everything was tactile. Corduroy, raw silk, crepe, each piece felt as alive as the women wearing them. Accessories got bolder, but always thoughtful. Chunky jewelry, leather belts with brass buckles, and oversized sunglasses added character to even the simplest look. Hair softened, gone were stiff sets, now replaced with waves, curls, or natural texture. And makeup followed suit, bronzer, earth-tone shadows, and a glow that whispered confidence, not concealer. Fashion in the 70s invited older women to breathe, to loosen up, to dress not for approval but for self. You weren't keeping up, you were finding flow. This decade reminds us that elegance isn't always about control. Sometimes it's about letting go. Next, let's meet the women who wore the 70s like queens, bold, brilliant, and beautifully at ease with themselves. 1970s icons. Over 50. Boho meets boss. The 1970s introduced a new kind of style icon, women over 50, who blended bohemian spirit with commanding presence. They weren't trying to compete with disco queens or studio starlets, they were building their own lane, and it was fabulous. Enter Katharine Hepburn. In her 70s during this era, she was still a fashion force, wearing wide-leg trousers, button-up shirts, and no-nonsense coats. She made masculine tailoring irresistibly feminine. She didn't follow trends, she was one. Gloria Steinem, turning 50 at the tail end of the decade, was another vision of confident dressing. Her aviator glasses, soft turtlenecks, and flared jeans weren't flashy, but they became iconic. She showed how substance and style could walk hand in hand. And then there were the countless everyday women who ditched girdles and embraced comfort. Teachers, writers, artists, grandmothers. They started choosing clothes that moved with their bodies and reflected their lives. Wrap dresses became a staple. Maxi skirts swayed through city streets and Sunday markets. The message? You didn't have to shrink with age. You could expand your wardrobe, your self-expression, your comfort. The 1970s gave women permission to dress for themselves, not just for roles or rules. It's a lesson still relevant today. Style doesn't mean squeezing into a trend. It can be as effortless as a draped shawl over linen trousers, or as powerful as a tailored vest worn over bare confidence. Let's step into the next chapter, the decade of shoulder pads, bold statements, and women dressing to claim space. 1980s power dressing. Shoulder pads and statement style. The 1980s didn't whisper, it roared. And women over 50 weren't left behind. They stepped into the spotlight with bold lines, structured silhouettes, and unapologetic flair. This was the era of power dressing, and it wasn't just for boardrooms. Shoulder pads weren't just a trend, they were a message. I'm here, I'm capable, and I look fabulous. For mature women, this was a declaration. Blazers became armor. Skirts had structure. Trousers were tapered and confident. Even dresses came with authority. Think cinched waists and dramatic sleeves, often in jewel tones or monochrome. Color palettes shifted too. Jewel tones reigned: emerald, sapphire, ruby, often worn as full sets or accented with bold gold jewelry. Silk blouses with bow ties at the neck added a dash of femininity to otherwise commanding outfits. It was balanced, soft, and strong. Footwear followed suit. Pointy-toed pumps, mid-height heels, and leather loafers gave outfits their final word. And hair? Big, voluminous, styled to say, "Notice me." For women over 50, the 80s was a chance to redefine visibility. You weren't a background character, you were the star. You could walk into a room in a cobalt suit and command attention without raising your voice. This decade taught us that elegance and power are not opposites, they're partners. Next, let's honor the icons who embraced this shift and made maturity the most stylish power move of all. 1980s icons. Over 50, fierce, feminine, and unapologetic. The 1980s were filled with icons who didn't just wear clothes, they owned them. For women over 50, this was the era to be seen, heard, and admired, not for youth, but for substance. Joan Collins, forever etched in memory as Alexis Carrington, became the face of 80s glam. At 50 plus, she wore sequin gowns, structured shoulder blazers, and dramatic jewelry with such authority you couldn't help but stare. She made being mature look magnetic. Then came Jane Fonda, redefining fitness and femininity. Even off-screen, her style was sharp, tailored coats, slim trousers, and high-neck blouses with bold accents. She was chic, capable, and never cutesy. She didn't soften with age, she sharpened. In politics and business, older women ditched the idea of fading away. Think of Margaret Thatcher in power suits, or media moguls like Barbara Walters, who anchored newsrooms with a signature look of crisp blazers and pastel silk. And behind the scenes, mothers, entrepreneurs, volunteers, everyday women took cues from these trailblazers. They embraced strong lines, smart cuts, and a bolder palette. Red lipstick returned, statement brooches reappeared. And no one said sorry for standing tall. These women didn't dress to please others, they dressed to match the size of their lives. Let's now enter the 1990s, a stark contrast from the high-octane drama of the 80s. Think calm, clean, minimal. A quiet kind of power for the woman who no longer needed to prove anything. 1990s, minimalism. Clean lines and neutral calm. The 1990s hit the reset button. After the excess of the 80s, fashion took a deep breath and exhaled into minimalism. For women over 50, this shift was a revelation. You didn't have to shout to be seen. You could whisper and still command the room. Gone were shoulder pads and sequins. In came monochrome palettes, sleek silhouettes, and fabric that spoke without embellishment. Think long-line coats, silk button-downs, and well-cut trousers in muted hues like camel, charcoal, navy, and ivory. The mature woman's wardrobe became about quality and refinement. A perfect white shirt, a crisp black blazer, a taupe cashmere sweater. These weren't trends. They were investments. Clothing was no longer decorative armor. It was functional elegance. Footwear got simpler too. Leather loafers, slingback heels, ballet flats. Jewelry became intentional. A single pendant, gold hoops, a clean watch. Nothing screamed. Everything spoke. Hair followed suit, shorter cuts, sleek buns, or undone waves. And makeup took a step back. Nude lips, soft matte skin, and minimal eyes. It was about enhancing, not masking. This era taught women over 50 that elegance doesn't always need drama. Sometimes, the cleanest line makes the boldest statement. You didn't need more. You needed less but better. Let's now explore the icons of this quiet power era women who redefine maturity, not with age-defying tricks, but with unapologetic simplicity. 1990s icons. Over 50. Quiet chic and subtle confidence. The 1990s were a masterclass in subtle power, and women over 50 led the way in redefining what grace looked like in an increasingly minimalist world. Take Lauren Hutton, a trailblazing model who, well into her 50s, modeled with confidence, lines, and that signature gap-toothed smile. Her wardrobe? Blazers, crisp white shirts, khaki trousers effortlessly undone, yet impossibly refined. She didn't chase youth. She owned time. Helen Mirren, too, turned heads with tailored jackets, velvet gowns, and an air of assurance that said, "This is who I am." She didn't conform. She curated and, in doing so, reminded us that style isn't about perfection. It's about presence. In real life, mature women simplified their wardrobes. They donated the frills and kept the essentials. A well-fitted camel coat, a leather handbag that aged with character. Scarves became styling heroes, draped softly or tied neatly to elevate the everyday. These women weren't trying to be flashy. They were focused, intentional. They wore fewer pieces, but each one mattered. Think of it like editing your wardrobe the way you edit your life. Keep what works. Remove the noise. Trust your taste. It's a timeless lesson. You don't need 20 statement pieces. You need 5 that whisper elegance in your language. As we move into the 2000s, the fashion world started to speed up. Trends came and went like waves, but women over 50 learned how to surf through them with grace, choosing what flattered and discarding the chaos. 2000s. Confusion, trends versus timelessness. Welcome to the era of rhinestone jeans, butterfly tops, and fashion FOMO. The 2000s were chaotic, and for women over 50, navigating them meant dodging trends like landmines while searching for pieces that still honored their identity. The early 2000s pushed youth-driven trends hard. Low-rise jeans ruled, crop tops dominated, and everything glittered. But women over 50 weren't looking for bedazzled denim or juicy couture tracksuits. They were searching for grounding pieces amidst the noise. This was also the rise of fast fashion. Suddenly, clothes were cheaper and more disposable, but that didn't mean better. Many women over 50 instinctively knew quality over quantity still mattered, so they adapted. Instead of skinny jeans, they embraced bootcut or wide-leg silhouettes that offered balance. Instead of tube tops, they chose wrap dresses and elegant blouses. They layered classic camisoles under cardigans, belted longer tops, and chose fabrics like cotton poplin, silk, or linen when the trends screamed polyester. Accessories remained a lifeline. A timeless handbag, think Coach leather, or a simple hobo-grounded trendy outfits. Loafers and sleek ankle boots added refinement. Scarves and jewelry became a form of rebellion. I'm not playing the trend game, but I still care. Makeup and hair became more experimental highlights. Soft layers and nude gloss lips dominated. Still, many mature women returned to what they knew. Timeless cuts, modest hemlines, and outfits that made them feel like themselves. The 2000s tested every fashion rule, but for women over 50, it became a decade of discernment, of saying no to noise and yes to what lasts. Next, let's look at the icons who did this best aging with class in a world that tried to speed past them. 2000s icons, over 50. Staying stylish in a trendy world. In a decade obsessed with youth and celebrity culture, a few extraordinary women stood out not by blending in, but by staying true to their refined aesthetic. They were the proof that you could look modern without sacrificing maturity. Let's start with Helen Mirren, now in her late 50s and early 60s. While the red carpets were filled with sheer fabrics and sky-high heels, Helen stunned in rich, jewel-toned gowns, velvet jackets, and tailored pieces that hugged but never squeezed her curves. She wore age proudly and turned heads without shouting. Meryl Streep, ever the understated fashion icon, leaned into structured coats, timeless prints, and monochrome looks. Her secret, confidence. Every outfit said, "I know myself." And that, more than sequins, will always sparkle. Then there was Oprah, an icon who made fashion deeply personal. She combined comfort with elegance, often seen in belted dresses, wide-leg pants, and tunics that allowed her to move freely. She made designer fashion feel accessible and encouraged women everywhere to find silhouettes that celebrated, not camouflaged, their bodies. Meanwhile, everyday women were quietly curating wardrobes that resisted the trends. They opted for deep V-neck knits, A-line skirts, kitten heels, and blazers with personality, showing that you could dip into trends without drowning in them. These women didn't dress their age, they dressed their truth. They understood that style isn't about denial, it's about selection. In a decade trying to erase lines, they drew their own in pencil skirts, scarves, and smart shoes. Now, let's enter the 2010s, a decade where fashion became more personal. And mature women began taking center stage once more. 2010s revival. Vintage, tailoring, and a new confidence. The 2010s brought a breath of fresh air to fashion, and for women over 50, it felt like coming home. After years of extremes, this decade embraced individuality. It wasn't about dressing young, it was about dressing well. Finally, suddenly, vintage was back, not ironically, but reverently. Wrap dresses, high-waisted trousers, trench coats, and silk scarves reappeared in new ways. And for women over 50, this wasn't retro, it was recognition. These were the pieces they had mastered long ago now, celebrated by younger generations. Tailoring took the spotlight. Mature women embraced structured blazers, cigarette pants, and midi skirts that created elegant lines. Monochrome outfits, especially in neutrals and soft pastels, became their secret weapons. The message? You could be polished without being loud. Even weekend wear evolved. No more oversized tees and sweatpants now, it was elevated loungewear, chic cardigans, and crisp sneakers that married comfort with class. Hair softened too. The gray hair movement gained momentum, and women stopped hiding behind dye bottles. Curls were embraced. Bobs got popular again. Natural beauty became not just accepted, but celebrated. Accessories became more thoughtful. Leather totes, bold sunglasses, minimalist jewelry, fewer pieces, better choices. The 2010s told women over 50, "You're not behind, you're leading." Fashion wasn't about catching up. It was about curating what already worked and letting it evolve. Next, we celebrate the icons who defined this rebirth: silver-haired sirens, who taught the world that age is not a fashion limit, it's a fashion flex. 2010s icons. Over 50, red carpet reinvention. If the 2010s taught us anything, it's that the red carpet doesn't belong to 20-somethings. Women over 50 stepped into the spotlight with more power, grace, and bold style than ever before, and the world took notice. Viola Davis was a vision in bold colors and clean silhouette. She embraced deep emeralds, whites, and reds that highlighted her skin and her strength. Her fashion choices weren't about trends, they were about visibility. Every gown told a story. I have arrived. I belong. Judi Dench became a quiet force of elegance. Never flashy, but always perfect. Soft silk jackets, embroidered shawls, floor-length coats. She reminded the world that regal doesn't need glitter. It needs substance. Then came the rise of Instagram icons, women like Lynn Slater, accidental icon, and Grace Ganem, who defied all ageist fashion rules. With silver pixie cuts, structured coats, and avant-garde sunglasses, they proved that women over 50 weren't catching up to style. They were creating it. Even street style began to shift. More and more women over 50 were photographed outside fashion shows, in belted trousers, oversized coats, crisp button-downs, and power flats. The fashion world finally started paying attention. These icons weren't dressing for approval. They were dressing with intention. They didn't follow fashion. They led it with decades of wisdom and not an ounce of apology. Now, let's walk into the present day, the 2020s, where comfort, sustainability, and quiet luxury redefine what elegance looks like for the modern, mature woman. 2020s present. Comfort meets couture. The 2020s have been a fascinating reset, a time when the world collectively slowed down, and so did fashion. But here's the twist. For women over 50, it wasn't a downgrade. It was an upgrade. Comfort became a form of luxury, and mature style found its stride. Gone are the days of suffering in stilettos or squeezing into too tight jeans. Now, wide-leg trousers, flowy midi dresses, and oversized coats define everyday chic. Fabrics have softened. Think cashmere knits, modal blends, breathable linen. Clothes move with you, not against you. Color palettes have matured too. Neutrals reign: oatmeal, dove gray, cream, sand, but with unexpected pops. A plum scarf, a burgundy crossbody, or emerald loafers. The key word? Understated. Layering became the new styling language. A long tunic under a tailored vest, a silky blouse tucked into elasticized trousers, wrap coats replacing structured blazers. It's not about hiding the body, it's about honoring it. Footwear has gone smart and supportive. Platform sneakers, loafers, block heels, elegant but walkable. And beauty? Natural hair, even gray, is now mainstream. Bare skin, light brows, a hydrating lip, less effort, more radiance. Social media also gave 50-plus women visibility like never before. TikTok, fashionistas, Instagram stylists, Pinterest boards full of grown-up inspiration. The world is watching and finally applauding. In short, the 2020s have brought freedom, not just to move, but to express. To style your age not as a number, but as a superpower. Now, let's look at the women leading this quiet fashion revolution who prove that you don't need noise to make a statement. 2020s icons. Over 50. Social media stars and street style queens. This decade has done something truly remarkable. It handed the microphone to women over 50, and they've used it to shout elegance from every platform. Enter Grace Ganem, with her sculpted silver hair, bold sunglasses, and high-waisted trousers. She became a social media sensation in her 50s and continues to set trends in her 60s. She mixes masculine tailoring with feminine flair and shows that style doesn't have an expiration date. Then there's Renya Jazz, who takes modern classics and gives them edge. A trench coat worn over wide-leg leather pants, or sneakers paired with a silk maxi. Her Instagram? A mood board for mature sophistication. Fashion shows now spotlight women over 50 in front rows and even on the runway. Street-style photographers chase them not because they're young, but because they're interesting. They've developed a language of style that only time can teach. And it's not just influencers. Everyday women, teachers, grandmothers, entrepreneurs are styling themselves with a confidence that turns heads. You'll see them in crisp suits at cafes, floaty dresses at farmers markets, or all-black ensembles on errands not for attention, but because it feels good. They're not dressing to blend in. They're dressing to belong to their age, to their joy, to their evolving selves. These icons have changed the definition of fashion leadership. You don't need a magazine cover. You just need courage, creativity, and maybe a killer coat. Let's zoom out now. We've covered 70 years. What's changed? What stayed timeless? And what can we learn from looking back? Decade comparison. What changed? What stayed timeless? 7 decades. Countless trends. Yet, through it all, certain truths about women's style, especially over 50, have remained remarkably constant. Let's start with what's changed. Silhouettes have relaxed. Skirts rose, then fell, then rose again. Tailoring came and went from cinched in the 50s, to floaty in the 70s, to oversized in the 2020s. Fabrics have evolved from structured wool to breathable stretch. And technology has democratized style. Now, anyone can curate a stunning wardrobe from a smartphone. But deeper than trends, fashion's purpose has shifted. Once about conformity and propriety, it's now about individuality. A 55-year-old woman in 1955 dressed to meet expectations. A 55-year-old woman today dresses to meet herself. And what stayed timeless? Quality, fit, confidence. A well-tailored blazer, a good pair of trousers, a beautiful coat. They have never gone out of style. Pearls still elevate. Scarves still transform. And self-respect still radiates louder than any print. Most importantly, what stayed constant is this. Elegance isn't about trying to look young. It's about looking complete. Every decade offered a lesson. The 50s taught grace. The 70s taught flow. The 80s taught power. The 90s taught restraint. The 2020s? They're teaching freedom. So as you craft your current style and evolve, don't be afraid to mix decades. A 90s trouser with a 60s blouse, a 70s scarf tied the 2020s way. The beauty of dressing over 50 is that your wardrobe becomes a personal archive, not of fashion history, but your history. Let's unpack that in full. What have all these decades taught us about dressing with grace and aging with style? Style wisdom at 50 plus. What every decade taught us. Every era came with fabric, color, and cuts, but hidden in those threads were deeper lessons. For women over 50, style has never just been about looking good. It's been about becoming whole. The 50s whispered, "You are allowed to be polished." A fitted bodice, a satin glove, they reminded women that poise is powerful. Even today, a well-placed accessory can shift your posture and your mindset. The 60s encouraged curiosity. Try the print. Wear the shorter hem. It said, you can adapt without erasing who you are. The 70s? Pure liberation. Flowy fabrics, natural hair, suede boots, they gave permission to breathe, to take up space, to dress for comfort without compromise. The 80s roared, own the room. Structured suits and bold makeup weren't just trends. They were tools. Tools for negotiating salaries, launching second careers, and walking into rooms where women weren't always welcomed. The 90s showed restraint and how elegance can live in a whisper. Minimalism taught us to value what lasts and to edit with intention. The 2000s reminded us to hold on to our style compass, even when fashion spins wildly. Choose what honors you. The 2010s told us we are visible and valuable exactly as we are. And the 2020s? They've offered a radical truth. Style doesn't have to hurt. It can be soft, kind, and sustainable. Add it all up, and what do you get? Wisdom, not just in age, but in taste, in dressing, in knowing yourself. Because dressing over 50 isn't about the right hemline. It's about asking, how do I want to feel today? And then styling the answer with joy. Let's wrap with that idea that legacy, your turn, creating a style legacy at any age. So here you are standing at the crossroads of history and possibility, decades of inspiration behind you, a lifetime of wisdom within you, and a wardrobe full of stories yet to be worn. Because here's the truth. You don't have to fit into fashion. Fashion should fit you. Every piece you choose, every coat, every earring, every pair of pants can be a love letter to the woman you've become. Maybe you carry the confidence of the 80s in your blazer, or the comfort of the 70s in your draped wrap dress. Maybe you mix a 2020s sneaker with a 1950s silhouette. That's not nostalgia, that's intention. Dressing after 50 isn't about reinvention. It's about reclamation. Of your taste, of your authority, of your joy. Let your wardrobe be your legacy. One that tells your daughters and granddaughters. Elegance evolves. Confidence is cultivated. And you never outgrow your right to feel beautiful. So next time you stand in front of the mirror, ask yourself not, does this make me look young? But, does this make me feel like me? And if the answer is yes, step into it. Own it. Walk out the door like every sidewalk is a runway. Because it is. And the world deserves to see what 50-plus fabulous looks like in full, radiant bloom. Fashion fades. But you're timeless.